Hello, this is GeoTechland, and boy do we have some major news today. The team over at Pine64 has just announced the PinePhone Pro, their flagship smartphone and the best way to experience mainline Linux on a mobile device. Developer pre-orders are open now for $399. So I've been covering the PinePhone extensively over the last year or two. While it has been a really cool device to tinker around with and showing off the promise of what we can find on a Linux smartphone, it was always clear that that device was not meant for daily use. It was essentially meant for beta testing what you can do on a Linux phone. The specs weren't too impressive. It almost seemed like it was just the bare minimum to run mainline Linux here, essentially to start work on creating a good Linux experience on mobile. The specs did need to improve significantly for the phone itself to be a bit more usable and maybe even potentially daily driver material. And I remember saying in maybe at least one video that I would love to see a more expensive PinePhone, something like a PinePhone Pro, for like $300, $400 with better overall specs. And it looks like the Pine team has delivered exactly that. So on their main website here, I'm gonna scroll down right to the device specifications. It's rocking a Rockchip RK3399S 64-bit system on chip with 2 A72 and 4 A53 CPU cores at 1.5 GHz. It's got an ARM Mali T860 4X core GPU at 500 MHz. It's got 4 GB of RAM at 800 MHz, which is 1 GB more than one of their versions of the previous generation PinePhone. The PinePhone that I had was 2 GB model. When it comes to storage, it's got a massive upgrade comparable to what you see on mainstream devices. It's got 128 GB eMMC flash storage, and of course optional support for a micro SD card. Their panel seems to be the same resolution, 1440 by 720p. This is the part where I did want to see it at 1080p, but I think that there still needs to be a lot of optimization in terms of power on a lot of the Linux distros, so I could understand why they might have chosen to stick around with 720p for now. The camera was another area where I felt like they needed to improve significantly, and it looks like they have a much better, at least spec-wise, a 13 megapixel Sony IMX258 main camera. And then for the front-facing camera, they have a 5 megapixel OmniVision. And then of course you have their modem, GPS, Wi-Fi specifications. It looks like it's using Bluetooth 4.1, so not 5.0, although I don't know how big of a factor or big of a difference that makes. Got a lot of the same pogo pins for OG PinePhone compatibility. And of course it's got the usual sensors, privacy hardware switches. Everything else is sort of standard stuff. The battery is a Samsung J7 form factor, 3000 milliampere. It looks like the charging speeds are going to be 15 watt quick charge USB power delivery, which I think puts it on par with a lot of modern phones. I think the fastest the iPhone goes is 20 watt, although I feel like devices are generally between 20 to 30 watt, so it's fairly competitive there. And of course they have an FAQ on their website for some additional information. This is going to open up the PinePhone and Linux to a lot more people. I think it's still going to be a lot of the enthusiast crowd, the ones that are already using Linux, maybe the ones that care a lot more about privacy and open source. Whereas I felt the first PinePhone was more for testing. I feel like this one might actually be usable, and it's going to make it so that a lot of users can actually use the PinePhone as a daily driver. Like when you think about it, the bare minimum that I think makes a phone usable, even usable to the average person, is just having a good battery life and having a fairly decent camera and just not being sluggish with performance. If they can meet all those things with this version, then maybe they might even be able to attract people from, the average person from iOS and Android devices. In terms of pricing, I feel like it is priced just right. Although I'm not sure how much improvement we're going to see in terms of build quality of the phone itself. Kind of looks fairly similar to the previous PinePhone. so I'm not sure if there's any improvements there. It feels like it might be somewhere between a budget or mid-range Android phone in terms of specs. And when you compare it to other phones, like let's say the Google Pixel or the OnePlus Nord, which is priced very similarly, it's obviously not going to be as good as those devices, but it could be pretty close. And remember, the Pine team is a smaller company, so it doesn't have the advantage of mass production, and they're on a mission to promote open source, privacy, security. So to me, the phone is more worth it than those other mid-range phones. And remember, with Linux, it's not just a phone, it's also a computer in your pocket, as you can see here with the phone being connected to the monitor there. But overall, I'm really liking this announcement. The Pine team has done a really good job being very open with the community, and it seems like they really understand what we want. It just seems like they're doing a lot of things right and really good decisions. It's nice to see all these different distros and flavors showing off the creativity and the openness and the competition among Linux here. But let me know your thoughts. Are the PinePhone Pro specs enough to convince you to ditch Android and iOS? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and if you like my video, please like, share, subscribe, and I will see you all next time. If you're enjoying my video, you can subscribe to me on YouTube, PeerTube, follow me on Odyssey. You could also support me on LiberaPay, Patreon, and by shopping at Earth Hero. See links in the description below.